Welcome to This Explainer. Look, have you ever felt like you're working harder than ever, maybe even earning more than ever, but you're just completely exhausted trying to stay afloat? Yeah, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're going to dig into why financial stress is no longer just a temporary dip. It's actually become a permanent, everyday feature of modern American life.
Think about this profound psychological shift we're seeing right now. We've basically moved from striving for prosperity to, well, simply fighting for survival. Not that long ago, the driving question for the middle class was all about growth and legacy. Now, that perspective has shrunk to a 30-day window. The optimism of building long-term wealth has been entirely replaced by the emotional exhaustion of just surviving until the next paycheck.
You know, we used to define stability by a few totally predictable milestones. Get a secure job, buy an affordable home, lock in a guaranteed retirement, and know for sure that your kids would have it better than you did. But today, stagnant purchasing power and relentless economic uncertainty have taken these standard life paths and turned them into impossible luxuries for millions of us. Okay, moving into Section 1, the price of survival and the explosion of living costs. So the absolute root of this permanent stress is that the baseline price of simply existing has just exploded. I mean, middle-income earners are now spending anywhere from 40 to 60% of their income on housing alone. Whether it's skyrocketing rent in New York and Miami or soaring mortgages in Austin and Seattle, shelter is literally eating up more than half of what people take home. And that leaves absolutely nothing for emergencies. And then, of course, you look at everyday items. Just trying to cover basic survival creates this constant, terrifying fear of not having enough. A carton of eggs, milk, cooking oil, these are delivering weekly price shocks at the grocery register. Plus, because America runs on cars, you're permanently tethered to fuel, insurance, and repairs. One single unexpected alternator replacement, boom, it can completely destroy a family's monthly budget. It's just a relentless nickel and diming of the American public.
Which brings us to Section 2, trapped by everyday debt, or what happens when debt actually becomes a lifestyle.
See, when your paycheck fails to cover basic living expenses, debt isn't just a tool for leverage anymore, it becomes a requirement just to maintain a normal life. And this creates a brutal dependency cycle. Everyday Americans are basically forced to pull out credit cards just to buy groceries or keep the lights on. You use credit to survive, you get hit with crazy high interest rates that drain whatever savings you had left, and suddenly, you're forced to use credit all over again. Now add the massive burden of student loans on top of that everyday debt, and millions of people are starting their adult lives already buried. It acts like a giant anchor, delaying everything. Marriage, buying a home, starting a business, it all gets pushed back by decades. Higher education was universally sold to us as this ultimate engine for freedom, right? But for an entire generation, it's instead created financial captivity. And then there's the ultimate wild card. A single medical emergency can financially destroy a middle-class family. It's a terrifying reality. Even if you have insurance, the fear of high deductibles, specialist costs, and surprise hospital bills creates permanent anxiety. Your financial survival literally depends on never, ever getting sick. Let's shift to Section 3, the invisible weight, and look at the real mental cost of money. Because the most dangerous part of this squeeze isn't just the math on a spreadsheet. No, it's the intense psychological toll. Welcome to survival mode. This mental state actually damages your decision-making and your emotional stability because your brain is constantly running these terrifying financial calculations in the background. You're trying to work or, just be present with your kids, but your mind is looping over overdraft risks and rent deadlines. It is pure emotional burnout. Under this intense pressure from inflation and disappearing pensions, millions of people are essentially living a double life. On the outside, they project perfect stability, decent salaries, nice clothes, a car in the driveway, but internally, they're drowning in a tornado of anxiety. The gap between the lifestyle they're projecting and how close they actually are to the edge is, well, it's absolutely staggering. And modern digital culture intentionally pours fuel right on this fire. We are constantly surrounded by frictionless spending triggers, like one-click shopping and targeted ads that are explicitly designed to break down our financial discipline. At the exact same time, social media bombards us with influencer marketing, luxury cars, and perfect vacations. It creates this unbearable pressure, pushing people to spend money they simply don't have, just to keep up the illusion of success. Okay, moving to Section 4, finding the path forward, going from despair to discipline. Well, the underlying system constantly pushes consumption and debt. You absolutely don't have to remain a victim to it. But look, Because everyday Americans lack emergency savings, life has become incredibly fragile. Think about how this escalates. Every surprise becomes dangerous, every setback becomes emotional, and every crisis becomes traumatic. Breaking out of this fear has to begin with radical awareness. You have to build a buffer between yourself and an unpredictable world.
The path to resilience isn't glamorous, but it is incredibly powerful. The future belongs to individuals who can actively resist impulsive consumer culture. We're talking strict debt control, basic budgeting skills, and most importantly, emotional discipline. You have to learn to think long-term and actively build those emergency savings in a society that is literally begging you to spend instantly. Basically, think of it as forging your own personal armor.
Ultimately, true financial freedom in the modern era is no longer just about earning more money. It's about building that unbreakable mental and emotional armor against a broken system. You just cannot out-earn bad habits anymore. Developing the ability to survive psychologically, to completely detach from the pressure to consume, and focus entirely on your own stability, that is the only real way out.
Millions aren't just struggling with money, they're struggling with a paralyzing sense of uncertainty. And until you take back control of your spending habits and your emotional discipline, the system will just continue to dominate your life. So the real question we have to ask is, will you let this permanent burden crush you, or what single step will you take today to build your armor and step out of survival mode?